Okay, this short video clip is a direct result of a live discussion slash debate that I saw earlier on between Danny Wells and another dog trainer. I think the other dog trainer is called Josh, I'm not sure, but a guy in the States anyway. And it was a heated discussion, a heated debate, and there was a point that came up, and it was the point that came up was I thought that's interesting, you know. So that's the thing that I wanted to talk about, because I think, in fact I know that an understanding of this particular point will benefit people and benefit dogs. And the statement is that you cannot change a conditioned response in a dog. So you cannot, let's take in this instance it was aggressive, but it could also be as in forward aggressing, you know, so not a dog that is aggressive by way of fear or defense or anything like that, but a dog that is proactively, you know, going out and aggressing towards certain targets where you may say it's idiopathic, so you can't put your finger on exactly why or exactly when the dog is going to do what it's going to do. And they're very difficult dogs like that. And it relates to dogs that are perhaps fearful, genetically more likely to be fearful than other dogs, or dogs that have got a strong learning history at a particular point in their development, that a fearful event happened in a particular context and it's stuck, and that perhaps it's generalized across to other areas. So you get a dog that is becoming more fearful or more likely to be fearful than another dog in a particular situation. Or you get dogs that are, you know, heavily predatory towards other animals because of their breed, because of their heritage, you know, because of their learning history, and the combination of the three. So the statement that was made, I believe I'm right in saying this, but the statement that was made is that you can stop that. I think what was being said was that you can get rid of, you can banish aggression through the use of obedience. So you can stop a particular conditioned response by teaching an incompatible alternative, right? And the discussion went down the route of the limbic system and, you know, the cerebral cortex and things like this, and we will stop bringing in nice terms that nobody really thinks about for a second when they're training dogs. You might sit down afterwards and think about it, but the fact of the matter is nobody trains a dog and whilst they're doing it thinks, I'm going to affect the cerebral cortex and not the limbic system, because if I bring the limbic system in, then I'm going to get, you know, conditioned emotional responses that are going to compete with the behavior that I'm trying to teach operantly with this dog. It's a load of nonsense. But anyway, so forget jargon and terminology. So in a nutshell, you have a dog that has a behavior that it performs, and that behavior is classified as undesirable, perhaps dangerous. You know, it is a bad behavior. It's potentially life-threatening for the dog or for somebody else. Society doesn't want it. Legally, it's not acceptable. So you need to change it. And somebody says, well, I can change that. And how are you going to do it? We're going to teach the dog something else instead. Okay. And what's the rationale behind that? Well, we're going to reinforce that thing so heavily so that when the dog is in this context, we're not going to do anything with that. We're going to leave the thing that it used to do. We're not going to allow that to happen. We're just going to work on this. And this is going to become so powerful, so strong. And this is going to become so weak, so shriveled, because it's not being reinforced, whereas this is. So this will be the new response that the dog will take forward. And thus we have banished and got rid of the initial response, our problematic response. That isn't true. It simply isn't true. You cannot, by simply avoiding a conditioned response where it's powerful or it's genetic, it's intrinsically rewarding, you know, it's self-rewarding, it's self-reinforcing. It doesn't need to have multiple trials, multiple events, multiple, you know, exposures where it's being positively reinforced or negatively reinforced to create a strong learning history. And if we take that away, then it will wither and die. It doesn't need that, because it's something that the dog is. It's something that the dog does. Okay, so if I'm just going to say, I'm going to teach you to do this instead, but I'm not going to teach you to do that. So let's say the dog jumps up. This is real basic stuff, but just to make a point. The dog jumps up and steals food off the counter. Okay, I don't want to punish the behavior of stealing food off the counter because I don't believe in punishment. And punishment, by the way, for anybody who is uncertain, is just about reducing the frequency of a behavior. It's got nothing to do with smacking, belting, kicking, whacking the dog or anything like that. It's behavior that we're talking about. So I don't want to punish the behavior because I don't like the idea of punishment. I work without punishment. I'm better than that. I'm beyond punishment. Real men don't train with punishment. So instead, what I want to do is I want to use positive reinforcement. I don't really want to use negative reinforcement. So I just want to add good things for things that the dog does that I think are good. So I'm going to say, okay, let's forget about the fact that you steal food off the side. Instead, I'm going to teach you to sit. And the longer that you sit, I'll reward you, you know, reinforce the behavior of sitting with food, probably a higher value food than the one that you would have stolen off the side. And, you know, I'll increase the duration. of that, and I'll gradually fade out the amount of food that I'm giving, so that becomes your new conditioned response, that when I'm in the kitchen and you're in there with me, you learn to sit. I probably don't even need to say it, it's just what you do. You learn to sit, and that's the problem resolved without any need for punishment whatsoever. You know, nothing had to happen that you consider to be unpleasant in order to stop that behavior of nicking food off the side from happening. Okay, take yourself out of the picture. Put the dog in somebody else's kitchen or several other kitchens. Put a higher value reward on the worktop, but take yourself out. Set the scene as the scene originally was when the dog used to perform the behavior that basically gave rise to you feeling the need to change it. And what you will see is an absolute return of that original problematic behavior. And here's the reason why. You haven't actually done anything to change the original existing association that the dog holds with performing that behavior in that context. All you've done is manipulated the context to allow your preferred approach, your preferred way of dealing with that situation, which is to teach an incompatible behavior, to allow that to work for you. And it will work for you, provided that that stage is maintained, provided that that jigsaw is joined, provided that that picture is exactly the same as you need it to be in order for the dog to realize, I need to sit in this context. But context is what I wanted to talk about. Context is where it's at. Because when you remove yourself, when you remove the setting, when you readjust the stage and put it back to the one in which the context matched the original response that the dog did, then the original response is almost 100% likely, right? Don't hold me on percentages because I haven't got statistics to be very, 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 very likely to show itself again, because the dog knows nothing other than this is rewarding in this setting. And the setting's different to the one that you've been teaching with your incompatible behavior. So if you're going to say, my way of dealing with aggression in a dog towards, let's say, aggression towards other dogs, and I'm talking about, you know, genuine forward aggression. I'm not talking about a dog that wants to tuck tail and bugger off but can't because it's on the end of a lead. I'm talking about a dog, and I'm not talking about a gobby shepherd that's bouncing up and down and bark, but when you take the lead off, it shits itself and realises, you know, like the bloke who's being held back in the pub by his mates from smacking someone, that when they let go, oh no, now what? I'm talking about the one that actually wants to, the one that actually will perform the behavior, okay, because it finds the behavior, for whatever reason, incredibly reinforcing. That animal, that dog displaying that behavior, you haven't changed it. You haven't addressed the behavior. You've simply modified the context to suit your preferred way of approaching the situation. The association that the dog holds is exactly the same as it always was. So if I take that dog and I've taught it obedience, and it's implicit obedience, it's absolutely on the money, and I walk it along and I'm walking it past dogs, absolutely fine. If I let that dog off the lead and somebody walks down a path in the street, where it always happens, and it's not me walking along, or the dog's off the lead, or it's walking with another member of the family who doesn't really know anything about what we've been doing, and that person walks that dog down, I guarantee you that that dog will show exactly the same behavior that caused the person to think obedience will resolve it. Because, again, the context is more in line with the situation or the context where the dog originally displayed the behavior. Is there anything wrong in teaching an incompatible behavior to a behavior that you don't like? No. But what you need to accept is that you will, in all likelihood, always be needing to control the environment to allow that process to work, to give it efficacy. Whereas if you actually allow the dog to experience consequences to its own behavior in the original setting where the behavior takes place, that is where you will affect a change in the conditioned response that you consider to be problematic, because the dog is teaching itself, and the dog is actually gaining new experiences as a result of performing the same behavior. And that's the only way that you're going to change a behavior. If something is reinforcing for me, if I find something very, very good fun to do it, I will continue to find it good fun to do. It doesn't matter if I find this to be also very good fun to do, perhaps more good fun to do. But if I can't do that, well, I'll do that, unless I learn otherwise. Okay, so it's nearly 10 minutes long. Sorry, prattled a bit, but hopefully that makes sense for people. That's my take on it, and I'm happy to go deeper into it if anybody wants to, but I want to keep it simplistic because it will undoubtedly lose people if you start drifting down the textbook route.